He passed out at the wheel, in the rain. Any other car? That's a death sentence. This one didn't even flinch. Picture the worst possible convergence of variables. A storm violent enough to blind ordinary cameras. A driver mid-collapse, no warning, no time to react. This is the exact test case safety engineers fear most, because it removes the one component every car on the road still depends on, a conscious human being. The vehicle in question is the XPeng G6, sold in some markets under the LO3 designation, and the footage circulating from it isn't a controlled demo reel. It's closer to a stress test the real world happened to run for free. Inside the cabin, an infrared driver monitoring array watches constantly, not occasionally, not on a timer. It tracks head angle, blink frequency, micro-expressions. The small physiological tells that precede a medical event. When the driver's head tips sideways and stays there, the system doesn't wait for a crash to confirm something is wrong. It reads the collapse itself as the failure. Here's the detail that actually matters, and it's the part most coverage glosses over. The car issues an audible alert first. It gives the human a chance to respond. Only when that goes unanswered does the Orion, sometimes written XPU or the OrinX compute platform, computer make the call to lock the driver out of the control loop entirely. That sequencing is deliberate. A system too eager to seize control is its own hazard. A system too slow is useless. The design threads that needle in under a second. Now comes the harder problem. Taking over is easy in theory. Taking over correctly in a downpour with zero human input is where most driver assist systems on the market today would simply fail. Optical cameras are essentially useless in heavy rain. Water sheeting across the lens turns lane markings into noise. This is precisely why the XNGP system doesn't lean on cameras alone here. Millimeter wave radar and dual LiDAR units cut straight through the precipitation, building a live 3D map of guardrails, lane boundaries, and the shoulder, the kind of layered sensor fusion that's become the actual dividing line in this industry, far more than horsepower or screen size ever were. With that map, the car doesn't panic brake into traffic. It calculates a trajectory, flips on hazards, decelerates in a controlled arc, and eases onto the hard shoulder. The instant it stops, doors unlock, SOS call fires automatically, GPS coordinates transmit to emergency services without anyone touching a button. Strip away the marketing language and what you're left with is blunt. This is a car making a life-or-death medical triage decision faster than a human paramedic could even be dispatched. A second, separate piece of footage raises the stakes further. This time, there's no medical emergency, just an obstacle suddenly filling the entire lane at speed. No time to brake in a straight line. Physics simply won't allow it. This is where the real engineering flex shows up. A crude system would yank the wheel, and yanking the wheel at speed is how you get a spin, or worse, a rollover. What the footage shows instead is closer to trained driver instinct translated into code. A curved evasive line, calculated in real time, that clears the obstacle by a margin measured in millimeters, not meters. Underneath that maneuver, the electric power steering motor is applying counter-torque to keep the front axle from darting. Simultaneously, the stability control system is talking directly to the drive motors, redistributing torque wheel by wheel, brake vectoring, essentially, to keep the chassis flat and planted through the maneuver. Under genuinely aggressive lateral G-force, there's no fishtail, no wobble on re-entry into the lane. That's not luck. That's 4 independent systems, steering, braking, torque distribution, and sensor fusion, negotiating with each other dozens of times per second. Here's where most people's assumptions get flipped. Watch a car execute a violent evasive maneuver like that, and you'd expect a stiff, track-tuned suspension underneath it, something that transmits every ripple in the tarmac straight into your spine. The opposite is true. Over broken, degraded pavement, the cabin stays almost eerily calm, and that's not an accident of tuning. It's a specific engineering decision to decouple 2 things that used to be locked together: steering precision and ride comfort. The suspension architecture, double wishbone at the front, multi-link at the rear, both in aluminum to cut unsprung weight, is paired with continuous damping control. The CDC valves are reading road surface data hundreds of times per second and adjusting damper stiffness in fractions of a millisecond. Hit a pothole, and the damper softens for that exact instant, absorbing the impact before it ever reaches the cabin floor. Combine that with acoustically laminated glass and active noise cancellation, and you get a strange contradiction: a chassis capable of near-violent evasive maneuvers, wrapped around a cabin that feels like a private jet at cruising altitude. But software has limits. When a collision genuinely can't be avoided, none of the above matters. What matters is the actual structure of the car. This is where XPeng's SEP 2.0 platform comes in, and it's arguably the least discussed but most consequential piece of the whole picture. Using 12,000-ton gigacasting presses, the front and rear subframes are forged as single aluminum alloy pieces, not welded from dozens of smaller stampings the way legacy platforms still are. Fewer joints means fewer failure points and less weight, while torsional rigidity climbs past roughly 40,000 mm per degree, numbers that would have been considered exotic race car territory a decade ago. Wrapped around that core is a boron steel safety cage, and critically, the battery pack itself, through cell-to-body integration, becomes part of the structural floor, not dead weight bolted underneath. Structure. Zoom out and the significance goes beyond one car. Western legacy brands built their advantage over a century by mastering mechanical complexity, the internal combustion engine, precision gearboxes, decades of chassis tuning heritage. That advantage is becoming almost irrelevant in a market where the deciding factor is whether hundreds of components can be orchestrated by one unified computing brain instead of a patchwork of disconnected supplier ECUs that don't talk to each other. Tariffs and trade barriers can slow that shift down. They're not going to reverse it. Consumers comparing what they get for the price are noticing the gap, and that pressure doesn't respect borders. So here's the question this leaves you with. If a car can outthink a medical emergency, outmaneuver a sudden obstacle in blinding rain, and still ride like a sanctuary, would you trust your family to that system in a storm? Or does human instinct still win, no matter what the sensors say?